Today's daf yomi is Shevuos daf mem Shevuos 40, and we're going to start on Lamites Amabei, three lines, two lines after the lines get wide. Today's daf is dedicated for a shmir for the Chayalim. It's all for the Shvuyim and Yeshiva for Am Yisrael. In this Eis Saraf, Mara is recording a dispute, or is discussing a dispute between Rav and Shmuel. We're discussing the concept of Moda b'miktas, that if you make a partial admission to a claim against you, that under those circumstances, you're biblically required to take an oath. So the Gemara tells us that Rav's of the position that in order for you to be biblically required to take an oath, the denial needs to be two silver coins. Whereas according to Shmuel, that even if the denial is only of a pruta, that would be sufficient. So the Gemara now is going to try to challenge Shmuel's position from our Mishnah. The Gemara says, Tanan, we learned in our Mishnah, Shtei kesef yeshli biyadcha. A person makes a claim, says you have two silver coins. And he says, Eilecha biyadi ala pruta. He says, no, I only have one pruta, which is a copper coin. He's pater, he's exempt. So isn't the reason why he's exempt? Isn't this a proof for Rav? My time Rav mishum dechasro etaina. Now, isn't it because his denial was not two coins, and so therefore that's why he has to. That's why he's exempt from an oath. But you have to do Shmuel, and it's a reputation of Shmuel says the denial only has to be a pruta. Armacha Shmuel, no. Shmuel say misavris shavekatani. We're not talking here about the value. He's not talking about he makes a claim for the value of two silver coins, and he admits to the value of a pruta, which is indeed a partial admission. No, that's not what we're talking about. Davka Katani, the Mishnah is talking about a specific case where he makes a claim for silver, and the person admits to copper. So, because a pruta is a copper coin. Masha tanu lo hodelo, masha hodelo lo tanu. So what he claimed you owe me silver, and what he admitted to him was copper. So therefore, it's not a case of a partial admission. Totally different thing. If that's the case, what about the next clause? Ema steifa, the next statement in the Mishnah says, Shtei kesef upruta yeshli biyadcha. Again, so Shmuel has to say that our Mishnah is referring to a case of davka, where he specifically made a claim for silver, and the admission was about copper. But what about the next clause, which says, Shtei kesef upruta yeshli biyadcha? He says, you owe me two silver coins and a pruta. And he says, Ein lecha biyadi el pruta. He says, no, I only owe you the pruta. So chayiv, under that case, he's obligated to take an oath. Now, if you want to say, well, we're talking about the value, which is what Rav is referring to, that's why he's liable for the oath. But if you want to say that, no, we're referring to, he made a claim for two silver coins and one piece of copper, and he says, I only owe you the copper. Well, if that's the case, why is he liable? He says, you made a claim for two silver coins and a copper, and he admitted to nothing about the silver. He just said, I owe you copper, and there's nothing to do with the silver. So the Gemara says, yeah, but that scenario, that scenario was discussed by Shmuel, and Shmuel says, Rabbi Nachman, Shmuel's position is that if you make a claim for Tanu, Chitin, Usor, and if you make a claim for wheat and barley, and he admits to one of them, he admits to either the wheat or the barley, that's a case of a partial admission. Hachinami man chayev. And Hachinami mistab, indeed, it's logical to say this exact approach. It's indeed logical to say that our Mishnah is talking about a case of Davka, which is how Shmuel is reading it. Why? Because we have in the next case of the Mishnah where it says litra. It says in the next case in the Mishnah, litra zav yeshli biyadcha. The person says, you owe me a piece of gold, and the guy says, ein cha biyadi el litra kesef. He says, no, I only have a piece of silver. He's potter. He's from an oath. Now he's exempt from the oath. Now, if we were like Shmuel that it's dafka, that the guy asks for silver and the other one gives him gold, that's why he's exempt. But if you say it's the value, like Rav was saying, my potter, why is he exempt? Litra tuva, he's made a claim for a value, and he's given him back, and he's admitting to part of the value. So it must be that talking about a case of dafka, and that's why he's exempt. Tell me the sefer dafka. So the Gemara says, well, if that's the case, that the last clause is dafka. So then also the first clause where we said shtei kesef yeshli b'yadcha el pruta, that case is also going to be dafka. Reisha nami dafka. And if that's the case, should we say that this is a refutation on Rav, who says that the Reisha is talking about Shaveh? So the Gemara says no. The whole Mishnah is talking about the rest of the Mishnah, aside from the case of Litra Zahav, is talking about a case of value. The Litra Zahav Shani, but the Litra Zahav, why are you going to be exempt in that case? That's not talking about Shaveh. That's talking about the top of Memad. That case is different. That case is fundamentally different, and we're going to say that Litra Zahav is talking about dafka. Why? Because there's a weight, vadai dafka katani. That's for sure dafka. But all the coins of the Mishnah are referring to shaveh. Shederach matbe'ala so damim. It's the value. But when it comes to the weight, that's specifically the item itself. That's specifically going to be the item and not the value. And we're on top of them, and I'll and I'll prove to you that the rest of the Mishnah Rav says is talking about value and not weight. The Katani Seifa, because the next clause of the Mishnah says, Dinar Zav Libiyatcha, I have a gold coin. And the person responds, Dinar Kesef, which treats us a puncha pruta. He says, I have a different coin. So in all those cases, chayiv, they're all going to be liable. Shakol min matbeya achasim, because they're all in the genre of coins, and so therefore, in all the case, we're going to say that they're liable. So we see that it's obviously talking about shaveh. If you want to say it's talking about shaveh, that's where they're liable to take a mode of mitzvah shvua. If you say it specifically, he makes a claim for gold, and the other person says silver. I'm not chayiv. If it's davka, why are you liable? So it must be that the rest of the Mishnah is like shava, which is how Rav is saying it. I'm Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar says, no, that's not a proof. Why? It's not a proof for Rav. Kishatanu bedinar matbos. So Rabbi Elazar says, no, there the claim was, he makes the claim with a dinar of a matbeos. What does Rashi say? Rashi says, Tevu b'matbea tzura v'lo tanu mishkol. There he specifically was making a claim for a coin that was basically engraved and not with the weight. And so this person, he makes a claim for a specific coin that was engraved, and he admits to him with a coin. And even though one coin is silver, one is copper, it was still the same genre because all of them are coins. So the person made a specific claim for a coin with an engraving, and he admits to him with a different type of coin. The Kamashmon, and it's teaching us the pruta b'kol matbeis, and that part of the Mishnah is teaching us that a pruta is considered to be a coin if you make a claim for it. And dekanami, and we can indeed infer it, the katani, because indeed we learned in the Mishnah, hakol min matbea achas, because the Mishnah then says everything is one coin, and so therefore we see that he makes a claim for one type of coin, and he admits to a different type of coin. They're all considered one coin, and therefore it's a mode of a mix. And the Rav Shakol din matbea achas. So the Gemara says, and how will Rav explain our Mishnah? According to him, Rav says that Mishnah is talking about shava, value. So if that's the case, how is Rav going to say the Mishnah that everything is one coin? And so Rav would say it's teaching us. Why is it teaching us this idea? because it's anyway we'd all already know it because it's the value. He said shakol dimat be'achas. It's to teach us this idea that all of the coins that are mentioned in the Mishnah have one war, meaning to say even a small coin, which is a pruta, is a partial admission in order to obligate an oath. Rebbe Lazar, and the Gemara says, and Rebbe Lazar, who says that case is referring to Davka, who says that the second part of the Mishnah is referring to specific. You want to say from the fact that Rebbe Lazar says that the last part of the Mishnah is referring to Shmuel as a case of Dafka. Reisha Nami Kishmos for do you want to say that also the Reisha in the case of this dispute of whether you need the denial to be at least 2 silver coins, which is what Rav says, or even a pruta like Shmuel, maybe you want to say also holds like Shmuel in the first clause? The Gemara says, no, Seifa Davka, Tikatani Shakol Mimatbea Achas. No, the last clause of the Mishnah is specifically Davka, because there it says everything is one type of coin. But Reisha Kiravu Kishmol. And in the first clause, they can hold like Rav or Shmuel. So now the Gemara brings a proof for Rav from the Tosefta that you need at least a denial of 2 silver coins. Toshma, it says, Dinar Zav Zahuv Libiyat. The Brisa says, or Tosefta says, I have a gold dinar Zahav Zahuv Yesh Libiyatcha. And the person responds, Eilcha Biyadi El Dinar Kesef Chayiv. So if he says, I have a dinar of gold Zahuv, and he responds, no, you only have a dinar of silver, he's liable. That's a partial admission. Let's see what Rashi says about this. Upirish dinar zahuv hainu tavu. When it says zahav zahuv, it means it's a coin, it's a minted coin. And what's the reason why he's liable? Because everything is one type of coin. And so therefore, even though he admits to silver, it's part of the coin. He says, you asked for a gold coin, it's a silver coin. He's not asking for gold, he's asking for the value of the gold. And so therefore we see from here that this is that, and anyway, we see from here, says Rashi, that this is the support for Rav. Why? From the fact that it needs to clarify that Zahav Zahuv, we see from here that our mission, when it says Dinar Zahav Stama, it's referring to the value. It's only in this case, it's referring to specifically a coin. And so therefore, that generally speaking, the value of the coins is that all the coins are one. And so therefore, from the fact that the latter clause is talking about the value, the first clause is also talking about the value. And in the Reisha, it says, it's talking about the value. And what's the reason why it's exempt, even though it's the same value? It's because he doesn't have a sufficient amount for the denial of two silver coins. So that's how we want to attempt this proof. So the Gemara says, time of Damo is Av Zahuv. That's the reason why he's liable there. Why? Is because he specifically says it's part of it's a coin, and so therefore it's from the same min. Hastama, but if he would just say the value, then we would be Shavaka Amarle. Then it would Hastama Shavaka Amarle, but just Stam would be the value. And from the fact that the latter clause is the value, also the earlier clause. Amar Vashi Hachakamer, no, that's not necessarily a proof. Maybe all it's saying here is call Omer Dinar Zahav, Omer Dinar Zahav Zahuv Dami. Maybe all it's saying, maybe all the Brisa is saying that the Brisa is talking about where he just makes a claim of a gold coin. And that's what you say. Why does it say Dinar Zahav Zahuv? It's just teaching us that whoever says Dinar Zahav, it's like he's saying a gold minted coin. And so therefore, when he just admits to a silver coin, his intent is for a coin. And so therefore, that's why it is considered hodah from the same minutaina. But it's not necessarily a case, the proof that it's specifically talking about shava, and also the ratio is talking about shava. It's just teaching us the law about how you make a claim for coins. Tani Rebbe Chia, Rav. So Rebbe Chia says, I'll bring a proof for Rav. He says, you owe me a stella. He says, no, I only have a stella that's missing 2, means to say, pays kesef chayev. chaser mea pater, meaning to say the admission, the denial has to be about 2 silver coins in order to be liable, and that's what that's Rav's position. Amar Nachmar Yitzchak, Amar Shmuel, Lo Shanu Tanas Malva Avodas Lova. When do we say this law that you require? So it says Rav Nachman in the name of Shmuel. Lo Shanu. When does our Mishnah say that you're liable if there was a claim of 2 silver coins? But that's when that's the minimum that you're required in order to be liable. Only Batanas Malva Avodas Lova. Only where the lender makes a claim and the borrower admits to it. But let's say we have another case of a shudia, right? So where there's one witness. So let's say the lender makes a claim, and then one witness comes along. But then then even if the claim was only a pruta, you'd be liable. My time. There cannot be one witness on a man for any sin. You can't have one witness on a man for any sin. But for an oath, one witness is sufficient. And so just like 2 witnesses can make you Vitanya, and we learned to the Bride. So one witness obligated to take an oath is the equivalent of 2 witnesses. Just like 2 witnesses can bring a claim for a pruta, so one witness can make you take an oath for a pruta. So when it comes to a claim from the lender to the borrower, there you need a minimum of 2 silver coins. But here, you need it just when it comes to one witness obligating you. There, you just need a pruta. So this is a statement we had. And Shmuel's position is if you make a claim for wheat and barley, and the person admits to one of them, that's considered a partial admission. He says, "Good job." And that's actually what Rabbi Yochanan said. And the fact that he says, you want to say Reish Lakish argues? So that's proof. From the fact he says, this is what Rabbi Yochanan says, it must be that Reish Lakish argues. Some say, no, it's not a proof. That Reish Lakish was quiet. When Rabbi Yochanan would say something in the base medrash, that Reish Lakish would wait until Rabbi Yochanan finished everything he was saying and all of his explanations, and then he would argue. And Rabbi Yitzchak left the base medrash, and he didn't hear if Reish Lakish was arguing. So basically, Rabbi Yitzchak thought, oh, Reish Lakish argues because Rabbi Yochanan said this, but he didn't know really if he was arguing. And so it's possible that he would agree. And some say Reish Lakish was drinking water at that time because Rabbi Yochanan was speaking, and he just didn't speak. Not that he was arguing with him, but not that he was agreeing, or arguing, but he was just drinking, and so he didn't have a chance to speak. Let's bring a proof for Shmuel that if you make a claim for wheat and you admit to barley if you make a claim for wheat and barley and you admit to one of them, you're liable to take an oath on the other one. Let's bring a proof for this from the following case. Lema Misaywe Tanu Chitin Vahodolo Besoran Potter. So it says in our Mishnah that if you make a claim for wheat and then you admit to barley, then you're exempt. Rabbi Gamliel says you're liable. So what's the reason why you're exempt? Time or the Tanu Chitin Vahodolo Besoran? Because the admission was nothing to do with what was claimed. You made a claim for wheat and you made it to barley. But if it will be a claim for wheat and barley, like our case here, then you'll be liable. Like Shmuel says, and the Gemara says, no. Well, who didn't that feel no, even it will be the case, even if it was wheat and barley, it'll also be exempt. And the reason why it just says this case to say if he makes a claim for wheat and admits to barley, it's to tell us even the strength of Rabbi Gamliel's chayiv. The Rabbi Gamliel say that you're still liable in that case. It says you don't even need the admission from the same category as the claim. Tashma, another attempt. Tanu kelim v'karkos. Let's say we learned in our Mishnah, let's say make a claim for utensils and real estate. Hodo b'kelim, and he admits to the utensils, v'kafar b'karkos, and he denies the real estate. Or b'karkos, where he admits to the real estate, v'kafar b'kelim potter. So in that case, so there was, again, he makes a claim for real estate and utensils, And in that case, he's going to be exempt. But that's different because that has to do with real estate, and we'll see why that case is different. Hodu b'miktas karkos, but let's say admitted, or on top of member base, let's say admitted to some of the real estate, potter. B'miktas kalim, but if he admits to some of the utensils, chayev. So now let's analyze the first part. Time of the kalim the karkos. What's the reason why if he makes a claim for real estate and utensils, he's exempt? The karkolav bashvui, because in general you never take an oath for a real estate. Ha-kalim v'kalim dumya the kalim v'karkos. But if it would be a case of utensils and utensils, where they would be two separate items, one will be kalim and one will be like karka, but meaning a totally different item, then he would be chayev, and that's exactly like the case of Tano Chita Nusaorin, and he admits to one of them, like Shmuel says, you're liable. So doesn't our Mishnah teach us that you're liable? Gemara says, no, who I didn't feel kalim v'kalim nami pater. No, it would be the case even if it was two separate types of utensils to be exempt. So why does it give us the law of kalim and karkos and teaching us that you're exempt? Kamash one is teaching us the chihoda b'miktas kalim chayev afal karkos, that when he admits to a portion of utensils, he admits to a portion of the utensils, then you have to teach, then he's going to tell us that you're liable to bring an oath even on the real estate, even though in general you're exempt on the real estate. So the says, well, my kamash one, what's the chiddush here? Why do you have to teach us this? We know that once you have to take an oath on something else, you can be forced into taking an oath on real estate. Tanina, we learned this explicitly already. Where do we learned this in the Mishnah in Kedushin, that we could drag along the nechasim that are real estate, take an oath on them once we're taking an oath on movables. And Mara says, ha'ikar hahi agav grar naspa. So it says, no, our Mishnah is the main idea of Gilgal Shevuos. There's the main idea that once you take an oath on utensil, you have to take an oath on real estate. And the Mishnah in Kedushin, it was just agav grara, was just dragged in. Agav grara nas, it was just taught by being dragged in. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Chia bar Abba Amar Rabbi Yochanan, he has a different explanation of Rabbi Yochanan. He says, Tanu chitin usa oren, if you make a claim for wheat and barley, and you admit to one of them, then you're going to be potter. That Rabbi Yochanan does not say like Shmuel. What about the fact that Rabbi Yitzchak said, indeed, Rabbi Yochanan agrees with Shmuel? So the Gemara says, no, we have a machokas amongst the Amoraim. What did Rabbi Yochanan say? So the Gemara is going to try and prove from this point that the Gemara is going to try and prove that not like Rabbi Chia bar Abba, who says Rabbi Yochanan says you are potter, and we're going to basically bring all the sources we saw earlier as trying to bring a proof for Shmuel, and now we're trying to bring them a question against Rabbi Yochanan. So what's the case? Tashma tano chitin v'hodelo besor and potter. If you make a claim for wheat and you admit to borrow, you're exempt. Rabbi Gamliel says you're liable. So what's the reason why you're exempt? Taimo de tano chitin v'hodelo besorim, because it was two separate items. Ha-chitin v'sorim v'hodelo b'achamei chai. Wouldn't you be liable if it was the same item? And this is the question against Rabbi Yochanan, who says you're potter. Where it says no, I didn't feel chitin v'sorim nami potter. No, also wheat and barley be exempt. The reason why it's written like this is just to teach us the kochos of Rabbi Gamliel, who says you're liable even in that case. Tashma from our Mishnah, Tanu Kalim v'karkos. If he makes a claim for utensils and real estate, Hodu b'kalim v'kafar b'karkos. He admits the utensils and denies his real estate, or b'karkos v'kafar b'kalim, or the real estate and denies utensils. Potter. So it tells us, but Hodu b'miktas karta potter. If he admits a part of the real estate, he's exempt. But miktas kalim, the part of the utensils, he's chayev. But don't we say from here, time of the kalim v'karkos? What's the reason why he's potter? Only because it's utensils with real estate, the karkalav bashvui, because you don't take an oath on real estate. How kalim v'kalim, dumya the kalim v'karkos. But if it will be two separate types of utensils, like real estate and utensil, but not real estate, but another utensil which you do have to take an oath, like chitin and so on, you'll be chayev. So isn't this a question on Rabbi Yochanan, or the way Rabbi Chia bar Abba understands Rabbi Yochanan? The Gemara says no. Who I did. That feel kalim v'kalim nami potter. No, our Mishnah is telling us that even kalim and kalim would be exempt. V'hakamash is teaching us to hold up a mitzvahs kalim chayv al karkos. That it's teaching us the chiddush that if you make a claim to a partial admission of utensils, you're liable also to take an oath on the real estate. So the Gemara says, "My kamash zok again." Donina, Zokinas Chassav Sheish. We already learned this from the Mishnah in Kedushin that you take an oath on something else, you're dragged into taking an oath on real estate. The Gemara says, no, ha ikar, ha hi agav gra nasma. Now, this here is the main idea, and that is dragged in agav gra. So the Gemara says, again, Gemara is challenging the approach of Rabbi Rabba, who says, Rabbi Yochanan says, Tanu chitinus oren, and Hodo Be'achem your potter. We have another challenge. It says, Eisei Rabbi Abba Bar Mamo, Rabbi Chia Bar Abba, Tanu Shor, V'hodo Biseh. So we went to the Bryce. So let's say you make a claim for an ox and you admit to a lamb, or Sev, Hodo B'shor, or a lamb and you admit to an ox, you're potter. Tanu B'shor V'sev, Hodo Be'achem and Chayev. So here we have a specific Bryce that says that if you make a claim for an ox and a lamb and you admit to one of them, you're liable. This is against Rabbi Chia Bar Abba's understanding of Rabbi Yochanan. Shmuel would say you're chayav, but Rabbi Yochanan would say you're potter. So the Gemara says, Amrway, I'm money, Rabbi Gamliel. He no. So Rabbi would say that that's only the position of Rabbi Gamliel. Well, if it's Rabbi Gamliel, I feel Reisha Nami. Rabbi Gamliel would say even if you make a claim for an ox and you admit to a lamb, you'd also be liable because Rabbi Gamliel doesn't say that the Odah needs to be from the Minataina. So he would say even if you make a claim for an ox and you admit to a lamb, you'll be liable. So obviously the price is not like Rabbi Gamliel. So the Gemara says, "Oh, money. No, the price is a third position. This is Admoni, and don't think we're just pushing it off to force the answer." Talmud Arachu b'Fivsha Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan used to say, "Hamani Admoni." This was Talmud Arachu b'Fiv. This was a established teaching, a set table in front of Rabbi Yochanan that this was the price of the position of Admon. Amar Anan, Amar Shmuel, Tano Chitim. Let's say he makes a claim for wheatim, the kadam v'hodu obasarim, and then before he can continue to say sa'orin, he jumps at and admits to the sa'orin, which our Mishnah says the Rabbanan say is pater. Now, but if he had gone along and said the sa'orin, then Shmuel would say you're chayav. But he jumped ahead and admitted to the sa'orin before the person can make the claim. So im kamarim, if we see he's just trying to get out of it, he's deceptive chayav. We make him liable. And we're miskavein, but if it was just done in the normal manner, we'll say his potter is exempt. Amar Rav Amar Shmuel, Tanu shtei michitin v'hodu ba'achas man chayev. Now let's say the person makes a claim. Excuse me. Tanu shtei michatin. Let's say he makes a claim for 2 needles v'hodu ba'achas man chayev. So he makes a claim not for 2 very large utensils, but he just makes a claim for 2 needles. So therefore, even though they're not worth 2 silver coins, he's going to be liable for an oath because they are specifically their own items in and of themselves. Lefikach yatsu kelim l'mashein. So therefore, that's why the verse says specifically kelim and doesn't say kesef. It says kesef o kelim to teach us that with respect to utensils, you're liable for an oath exactly like they are, even if they're not worth a pruta. Amarav Papa Tanu Kelim Upruta. So let's say a person makes a claim for utensils and a pruta. V'hoda b'kelim v'kafar b'pruta, and he admits to one and not the other. Potter. Hoda b'pruta v'kafar b'kelim. Let's say he admits to the pruta, but it rejects the utensils. Then he's going to be chayav. So chada karav, chada kashmol. So in the first case, chada karav, the first case where he says he admits to the utensils and denies the pruta, we're going to say he's liable for an oath. Who says kfiras taina shtei kesef? He says it needs to be 2 silver coins, the denial, and so therefore, if he admits to the utensil and denies the pruta, therefore, we're going to say he's exempt from the oath because there's just a pruta and it wasn't his admission. It needs to be at least 2 silver coins, and if he admits the utensil and denies the pruta, he's exempt because he did not deny 2 silver coins. But the other cases like Shmuel, the Amar Tano Chitinu Sa'orin v'Holu Ba'achas Man Chayev. So where Shmuel says if you admit to one of them, if he makes a claim for both, you admit to one of them, you're going to be liable. So then Okay, we'll stop here. This is today's daf. We'll stop here. Everybody have an amazing day. Yashikol. Tomorrow we talk about Shevuos Hesed. Okay.